Ik denk dat het voor ieder orkest belangrijk is om een goede repetitiezaal te hebben. Het repetitieproces leidt naar uw artistieke prestatie op het concert en dat moet in de best mogelijke omstandigheden. We hebben jarenlang in een te kleine ruimte gezeten waar geen sprake was van projectie van klank. Het orkest komt net in de box. De dirigent stond met de rug tegen de muur, percussie aan de andere kant, de strijkers aan de zijkanten. Iedereen zal zeer opgelucht zijn dat dat voorbij is.
Like when you're sitting next to them, I think it will feel better to feel like you've got.
The original brief was to try and create a space that the orchestra could rehearse in with the closest conditions possible to the stage of the Honorary Boeuf. How the orchestra could sit and align themselves and what the podium was like. Even though the Henry Boeuf Hall is seen as their home, actually their real home is their rehearsal space, where they spend hours, days in one room. And so I think to try and align that experience back to the Honorary Boeuf Hall, both materially as well as acoustically, I think was sort of important.
Bonjour, tout le monde, goedemorgen. This week again, programmed for the opening of the season in Bozar.
De naam die we gekozen hebben voor de repetitiezaal is BNO Atelier of Atelier BNO. Heel bewust gekozen voor het woord atelier. Hier gaat de identiteit van het orkest opgebouwd worden. Hier gaan we ook zorgen dat het een thuis is voor de muzikanten. Het zal ook een startpunt zijn waar we kunnen gaan denken en visie gaan ontwikkelen over waar willen we artistiek en qua identiteit met ons orkest naartoe.
Making an acoustic hall is quite specific. You're trying to choreograph and really very precisely engage with what the acoustic is going to be. The Henri Boeuf Hall was made in this sort of time of austerity. They use terrazzo on the floor, there's oak and there's plaster. And so our starting point was to say, well, how could we think about those materials and create something that feels like a continuity with the experience of that hall within this new hall. So we started looking at plaster as a material because it would provide a material that you could form and then use it in a kind of radically new way. How an orchestra might think about it. They're both looking to history, but they're also thinking about how to reinterpret that and make it into something that's sort of the future. The room would need to be adaptable. Its acoustic would need to be adaptable. We started to use the idea of the curtain as a way to change. So you move from a reverberant surface to an absorbent surface. And we didn't want it to become completely different in those two conditions. So maybe the way to think about the room was that we would start casting something that was like a plaster curtain or a series of layers of plaster curtain over which real curtains would sometimes be pulled.
Can we try to open, 2 meters, just first. Good, super. Thank you.
Je décrirais cette sonorité comme étant d'une part naturelle, la salle ne transforme pas du tout les sons et on a une aura de résonance qui est limitée mais qui est suffisante pour justement obtenir cette rondeur et cette projection qui est nécessaire pour que les sons soient les plus beaux possibles. On fait un instrument qui a besoin de pouvoir résonner dans une acoustique adaptée et ici on se trouve vraiment dans une configuration formidable. La salle de concert, c'est la cerise sur le gâteau. Mais donc ici, la disposition est formidable parce que nous allons retrouver exactement les mêmes places que ce que nous allons utiliser au Palais des Beaux-Arts. C'est du grand confort par rapport à le moment où nous changeons de salle. Nous n'avons plus le questionnement de savoir est-ce que j'aurai mon voisin qui sera dans l'oreille droite ou gauche. C'est exactement la même chose.
I think what interested us was the opportunity to think about that hall as part of a sequence of spaces from Gare Centrale through the Galerie Ravenstein and to the Palais de Bozar. And we were quite excited about this idea of bringing a hall that was in a way the public use back into some kind of public use again, as well as a hall for rehearsal, and that it might be able to be adaptable to both of those kinds of uses. The space that the orchestra is playing to could have a real audience in it. The orchestra might invite people for educational reasons, it could be schools or young musicians, or there could be moments where friends of the orchestra are allowed in for a sort of intimate dress rehearsal.
And all we can hope is that maybe it has an influence in how the orchestra works in the future and how they start to feel in this space, and maybe that will also then transfer itself to the stage in the Henry Le Boeuf, which is obviously where their output gets heard.